Louisiana's United States congressional delegates are posting reactions to Operation Epic Fury on social media. Fox 8's Jennifer Crockett joins us live in studio. So Jennifer, you talked with delegates on both sides of the aisle. What are their biggest concerns as we are now on the verge of day 2 of this conflict?
Lauren, there are concerns for American troops and citizens abroad, even about the potential retaliation that could happen here at home.
We know that the Iranian regime is an evil and a disabling force, one that does not love America. We understand that they are the enemy. However, we should always endeavor to have proper oversight, proper next steps, and a plan.
Louisiana Congressman Troy Carter, a Democrat who serves on the Homeland Security Committee, said he was not informed or consulted before Saturday's coordinated attacks on Iran. House Speaker Mike Johnson from Louisiana releasing a statement that 8 senators were told this week that military action may be necessary. Louisiana Senators John Kennedy and Bill Cassidy, both Republican, do not appear to have been included in that group. Kennedy offering a 2-sentence statement. Quote, Khamenei chose war. He paid with his life. Cassidy posting in part, quote, the president's decision to attack Iran presumably was based on a clear and present danger to the United States. Congresswoman Julia Letlow, also a Republican, saying she too trusts the president's judgment, adding that addressing safety and containing the conflict is the next step.
America should always do everything possible to avoid civilian harm, but the Iranian regime is responsible for choosing escalation and putting its own people in danger. The focus must stay on military threats and protecting American lives.
Rest assured that Congress is going to do everything in its power to keep the Americans safe.
House Democrats will force a vote on an Iran war powers resolution next week. This legislation would require the president to make the case to Congress for using military force against Iran. In June, a similar bill failed to pass in the Senate.